What is up, everyone? My name is Volathis, and this is another episode of Just Building Minecraft. So, as you can see, did something a little bit different this time. Unfortunately, I didn't record like this ever since then, but I borrowed Wolflord and had him record for me building a garden that was going to be for the castle area. So thankfully he was able to record it, and for some reason every time we do these Minecraft episodes I look like a girl because apparently my skin doesn't load over to everyone else, but perfectly works fine for me. But anyways, let's get back to it. So I borrowed him for the recording so that I could give you guys a different perspective of what I do. And my goodness, he's been doing a lot of different settings to record this. But as you can see, first I started out laying the little frame for the what would be kind of a royal garden area, and this later on became a sort of a maze kind of deal. It was pretty simple maze. So obviously I started out with that blue wool, as you can see, and I started spacing the oak wood because obviously if I put so many leaves up, this thing's gonna deteriorate over time. I wanted to make sure it stayed up, and I started punching holes in the ground. They weren't too happy about that. This city produces so much lag if there's shadows beneath, and I make light and then I fill up those shadows. So it took me a few attempts. Apparently I'm not really good at spacing out or predicting my numbers, but once I got the general layout of the stumps, I went ahead and started working out on laying the base kind of area of the maze, and punched a giant hole in the city, as you can see down below. And you can see a gist of what one of my other friends has been working on. He's actually taken over a what are these, like the ancient water runes in the air, and he's building his own thing. Maybe one of these days we'll spy him and see what he's all been doing. But as you can see, I quickly filled in that giant hole with a bunch of dirt, and after that I kind of just built the maze in my head. Obviously, like I said, one of these areas is a lot easier to get through than the other, and after that I went ahead and pretty much just put in some flowers, and I'm not sure if I did in this video footage or later, but I added vines on it, and I might even come back to it further later on and see if I can edit. I have a few ideas what I want to do, but obviously I did some spacing and stuff like that. I did a little pre-mapping with the blocks where I put the wood blocks, and then I just built the leaves over there. I used look, I can talk tonight for some reason. Not really. I used oak wood and oak leaves to go with it, just to keep it that way. And as you'll see later on, I put in flowers just to give it a little bit something. But we will move on to the other stuff I worked on. This episode's kind of off schedule-wise where I thought I'd be, but I definitely have plenty of footage, thank goodness, for me to go off of. Obviously, also, as you've seen, Wolflord's actually quite a bit ahead of me in this series. No idea when I'll catch back up to him, or if I will, but obviously what we record is obviously a little bit different than what you guys see, and Wolflord gives his explanation and I give you my thoughts and all that. So without further ado, we'll move on to the rest of the building. After the maze area, I went over to the other side and started to work on the fountain. I want both sides to be very open to the public, and definitely wanted on the other side maybe a sort of fountain area. I was thinking about a lake, but I think that was too much. It would definitely need a bigger scale. So I started working on the fountain. I started with stone brick, and apparently once again I started using the famous stone brick monster egg, because obviously this game likes to troll me and decides that's more important to be first. So I started working on it, set it up very basically, and put water, and then after that I was going to have a grassy area around it so that it could definitely be a little bit more welcoming, and definitely stop having the stone brick as a base material. I've used it so much on this area that I definitely wanted to cut back on it. And I'll probably go over it again eventually and probably make it a less recurring material. But I started working on it, and then after that I decided that the base of the fountain was going to be the polished andesite. It definitely looked a lot better, and after that I started to work on the water. I felt like just the stone bricks weren't enough. I wanted the middle of it to be sort of like sea lanterns. I wanted there to be light from it. Obviously, since it's water, it doesn't really produce light, and I didn't want to do the jack-o'-lanterns, but I think it looked nice after I was done with it. After that, Wolf Lord messed with me for a little bit, building some kind of pole, because apparently he has a weird fascination with poles. Anyways, after that, I went on to work on the dock area for this magical city. Originally, I had planned when the city was still on the ground was going to be an island, and most of their trade was obviously going to be by ports. And when this magical city was lifted out of the ground and moved to its current location, the dock went with them. So obviously this port is actually still in use. That's the plan for the port, and the port is actually going to have airships, which still very on the mythological side, but in real world possibilities, no, it'd be airplanes or something like that. But I extended it out so that the dock wasn't just like this thin slab, and I think I started with originally like 7 or 8 actual dock ports, or whatever you would call those. And I felt like that was too much. I didn't want to have a whole lot of port, and I felt like it was just a weird extension of the city. So after I had mapped out, I definitely started mapping out to make sure that I would have the room for these airships, because an airship isn't small in the scale of things. It is quite large. And I even extended the stone brick a little bit as well, but I definitely wanted to make sure there was at least a good amount of space in between them, and I wanted to make sure there was a decent amount. I think the final version of it, I have 6 ports, I want to say, and these ports obviously were very simple. They were with the birchwood, as you can see, and I believe I used the dark oak fence post to be kind of the markers, because typically when you build a port, you have the poles that would go down into the ground, and which is obviously keeping the port up, but at the same time those also can be used as a way to tether your ship so it doesn't float away. Obviously with airships, it's to make sure that while you're a town or something, maybe the airship doesn't crash into the city or just keeps moving. So these were 4 blocks wide, and about, I think it's every other piece of it was going to be with those poles for them to attach. And then after that, I went on to start working on making an airship. Now the airship was not an easy task for me because of the fact that I used no reference materials of this, and even after I finished the airship, I'm thinking about later going back to it. I did not realize that the airship would take up so much space. The space between the docks was supposed to be accommodating, and barely pulled it off. It was very simple at first. I used obviously the oak wood and oak wood planks for it, and started with the bottom of the ship to work on it and eventually build myself up. And obviously, since I didn't really use any examples or anything, it was kind of hard to plan because I had to eventually decide what would be the reason that these fly. I didn't want to keep it as simple as it's just magic, they're just floating. And it was not an easy task for me. And as well, I started, after I'd outlined the bottom, I made sure to just keep building up the frame and all that. And after that, eventually I was able to start making the base of it, the top, and fill that in. I only used the ladder, obviously, to get up, and eventually decided that this was going to be more of a merchant airship. It's not meant to be really huge, but enough to get the goods they wanted to the city. And I started to fill it in. It was very simple. There was only enough space for the cargo down below. There's only really a captain's quarters kind of deal. So this was a very simple ship that I made, and the captain's quarter had just barely anything in it. These were meant to get the merchant to the city and back, and I toyed around with a lot of the design. I made the trapdoor so if they needed their cargo perhaps lifted up by a crane of some sort, they could and use it. I started to make a makeshift crow's nest and pretty much decided I wasn't going to use sails on these. I might change that, but for the most part, I didn't really think it would look that well. I mean, obviously it would look like a ship, but sail may not have as much purpose, and ultimately tried to make makeshift balloons out of the the fence posts and red wool to look like the balloons, and that was going to be kind of the reason why they're floating. And then at the back, using the oak stairs with a little bit of tweaking in that, it made it look like there was a propeller on the end. And other than that, that was about all I did for it. And then I went around and made sure that the top half of the ship had I cannot think of the name of what it is, the steering wheel of the ship. So obviously this wasn't just flying on its own. It was a very simple design. It definitely filled the area. I did some minor framework too to make sure it looked well and all that. Other than that, that was about all I did for the ship. It's a very rough drawing, and like I said, obviously I'm probably going to go back and work on a little bit more, but it was not my worst work, but it's definitely going to need some improvements. After that, I went on to work on the wall that was at the dock area, and I started to work on the inside of the tower using the stone brick stairs to kind of give it a little bit of an archway, and I raised it a little bit higher than the other walls. I'm thinking about maybe going back to the walls later and making them the same height so it doesn't look as strange, but I raised that and basically used the oak wood planks to obviously be the walkway for that, and then I made the crenellations for it, and I looked at the wall and felt like it was just standing way too high the way it was, and actually at each dock ending I made pillars which were going to be used to make sure that it wasn't looking like it was just holding up by nothing. And then after I was done with that, I went back to the wall and started to work on kind of a roof area, because I wanted to make sure the guards that walked under this weren't soaked in rain and all that, and as well as had cover and all that. Thinking about maybe going back to and raising a level. I feel like the gap in between the crenellations and the roof are just a little bit too much. But that's all I have for this week's episode of Just Building. Next week, probably going to finish up the other wall, and after that we also have the pour section you've obviously already seen on Wolfward's channel. Make sure to check that out, and after that we're just going to keep working on the city. I've already started outside of it trying to work on mapping it, so it'll be a lot easier for me to build. Definitely, so I have a much better idea of how I'm going to build this. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment down below, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. And as always, stay magical.